Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics.
Hi everyone, welcome to another podcast from Speaking of Reliability. My name is Chris Jackson.
And I'm Diana Deeney. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Diana. And we were going to launch into a conversation about sedentary inertia in the reliability and quality world.
I love this. I love the topic.
Yeah, I think title. a lot of listeners know what it means. Without us having to explain it.
Well, do you think we should explain it just for 30 seconds?
Sure. Well, inertia is essentially, the very Newtonian definition of or characteristic of a body in space. If it's moving, it wants to stay moving, and if it's not moving, it wants to stay still. So, where you have kinetic inertia or moving inertia, that's fantastic, and that sort of just is a good analogy for people who are always wanting to push the envelope in a good way. They can't slow down. They can't accept the status quo. They always want to be moving and improving. And then there is sedentary inertia, and we know those people who have always done it this way, or who have spent their entire career being the only one who can interpret what seems to be the godlike standard for this particular technology. And every single change requires either one, more effort on their behalf, or two, them to be pushed outside their comfort zone. And so nothing ever changes. Did I nail it, or do you need to fill in the blanks?
No, I think you nailed it. And plus some. It sounds like you've had some personal experience with this.
Well, I think we all have.
Yeah.
But, and I think,
and
you go.
Yeah. And quality people tend to get a bad rap and a bad reputation for being the sedentary inertia person who doesn't want to change the status quo. We've got this system set up and it's working and we can monitor things. Why would we want to change it? Which is a little bit curious because, a big section of quality is also about continuous improvement. But when these inertial changes happen, like introducing something brand new technology, which may be building off of what you already have, but is really rather different, that's where the whole continuous improvement cycle sort of cycles its way off to the side. And there is, like you said, there's this fear of not wanting to deviate too much from what we're doing because we understand what we're doing right now and we don't want to change that. Yeah.
Right. And for that reason, those people would be great horse and buggy manufacturer, quality control department people, because as near as I can tell, that technology hasn't grown too much over the years. And yes, there is an ongoing need for horses and buggies. But if you're going to invest a good ton of money into a horse and buggy manufacturer versus perhaps an autonomous electric vehicle manufacturer, I know which one I'm going with.
The horse and buggy, because you're quaint. You're quaint like that. Yeah,
that's right. I'm resistant to change. One of my favorite examples of the quality sedentary inertia stereotype was working with a medical device company. And we're trying to formalize specifications for an amazing new product. And we had the quality guys in there. And essentially what they did, whenever we came up with an idea for formalizing what our amazing new product was going to do, if they couldn't see how they could test for it, they said it can't be a requirement. And I went, hang on, are you trying to say that if we can't replicate this requirement in a testable way in your laboratory, and that not only just in terms of can we physically do it, but do we have the time and money to do it, then it needs to be removed from our requirements list? And they were adamant, absolutely, you can't do that. And that's a cultural problem. You can't, if these, in this case, gentlemen, and they were older gentlemen, it's hard. it's difficult to see a scenario where they're going to all of a sudden get out of that particular mindset. But that, by definition, means that we can never innovate, because the things we're looking at these days are becoming increasingly sophisticated, where the testing for it in terms of the very basic demonstration testing mindset is just, it's not a thing anymore. And it's a great example of sedentary inertia in the quality control space that is impacting what a design engineer can come up with.
I read a book recently that kind of talked about the innovative space versus the sustaining space, especially in a company where, if you have the horse and buggy, we'll keep going with your example. You have the horse and buggy part of the company and they're cranking out buggies. They are doing their thing, and there are quality standards, and they're doing the tests and everything. And they are manufacturing to a standard, and they're generating the money for the company. And then you have the innovative side that wants to develop the electric car. So they're using some of the funds and stability from the part of the company that's generating the buggies, but it's a separate division that is innovating and looking at new ways to do things. So they are really separate worlds, right?
And
or I guess, but we're also talking about the kind of innovation where we want to upgrade whatever they're doing in the horse and buggy area to something new and innovate that way. That's where more of the problems come into play, right?
And the problem with this conversation is that we need this wonderful thing called nuance, because you can't say that, I think we're going to furiously agree, you need to have a healthy dosage of each. You need to have innovation. You need to have perhaps a bunch of guys and girls in their own building allowed to do whatever they want to try and pursue the goals of tomorrow. And some other companies who do this well actually embed the concept of innovation within product development teams, because each new generation of product needs to be better than the last. There's no right or wrong answer. I'll tell you, actually change that. There are lots of right and there are lots of wrong answers. I was working with an organization once where they had an innovation cell. That innovation cell was primarily there to make the leadership group comfortable about the concept of innovation, because they didn't really want to innovate. And so this innovation cell had a relatively good budget, and they were able to chase down pretty much anything they wanted to without any guidance or any, let's just say, interaction with the rest of the organization.
Okay.
The problem with that is that they kept pursuing their favorite little pet hobbies and became completely irrelevant. And so the organization was not innovative as a result.
Oh, there was nothing coming from the innovative side to develop into a sellable product.
Right. So it can go too far, or you can have the security blanket approach where you have something which is labeled innovation, but is it embedded into your sort of short to medium to long-term product development process? If it's not, then all the leadership team are doing is essentially trying to convince themselves that they are innovative while they go back and crank out more horses and buggies.
So there needs to be a transition point from the innovative side, no matter where it is, into long-term production stuff. And we were originally talking about the sedentary inertia and quality. And, going back to your example, you were coming up with innovative ideas and quality was pushing back because they didn't have the capability to test. And it didn't matter if it was they didn't have the equipment or they didn't understand how to test it. It was just conceptually, you weren't allowed to have that requirement unless they could test it, right?
Right.
So how did...
So I was going to say, I've gathered because you've been involved in the medical device industry that I think I'm guessing that in your bones, you can just relate to how limiting that would be to design and development.
Yeah, and there's a lot of new things that could be done in the medical space, but there's a lot of the proof of concept has to be done for obvious reasons. So what was new 10 years ago for the commercial space is now new in the medical device industry today because there's a delayed innovative development with proving out the safety and efficacy of a new medical device to affect human life. So the innovative part of new development and then the quality part of new development. What did your team do in the case of that example that you were giving, that you wanted to develop requirements, but you weren't being allowed to? What did you do?
Well, I was a consultant, so I was part of the process in terms of putting this together, and I made recommendations per se. So I wasn't responsible for implementing these things, but again, I mean, there are obviously cultural issues at play. I think one of the easiest things a leader can do is actually take the time to try and describe the customer of the future. And the customer of the future may want an increasing reliance on devices that can pair with and be utilized by a smartphone, for example. Customer of the future might want that medical device to give you an output in less than 15 minutes, which then has some very clear design constraints. And if those are put up front by the leadership group, it can then short circuit what would otherwise be internal conversations, peer to peer, so to speak, between the quality guys and the design team.
So relating it back to the customer,
right?
That this is what our customer needs, and these are the kind of things we need to be able to provide in order to stay competitive.
Yeah, and essentially, then if that comes from the leadership team, that can really, really help what will otherwise be an enduring source of friction between two different parts of the same team. And it also goes to show that I would suggest that sedentary inertia or stereotype we've been talking about, it usually is a symptom of an organization which just has a quality control group in that building over there, so that we do quality control, but let them to an extent run amok or not have their own direction or not be involved. And that also usually means is that if anything goes wrong when it comes to quality, the quality control people, they're the ones who wear it. And you have this tense defensiveness, which you can very easily understand if you look at the history of that culture in that organization. So it takes a while to turn that ship around, in my opinion. But it usually means the leadership has been lacking in terms of the direction of the team and the roles that each team member plays. That'd be my take on it. And the scenario we're talking about, they had to make a call. They had to make a call between, I said, in the short term, you just need to say, are we going to have, as a leader, are you going to have requirements that can be tested for or not as part of quality control? Yes or no? And that was an attempt to try and short circuit these never-ending arguments that were internal. So if the quality control guys didn't like the answer to that question from the boss, then essentially they had to deal with it because it was from the boss and not peers in the production process. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it wasn't healthy, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, you talk about the greater organization and the responsibilities of some quality people for control, for the manufacturing control, to make sure that when things are shipped, it was made right.
Right.
So there is that viewpoint that needs to be addressed and understood when you're exploring new ideas.
Absolutely.
So, we talked in the previous episode about getting quality involved early, and quality people still have a good independent viewpoint of what's capable now. So in the case of this new innovative idea that they said, well, we can't test that. They could probably also have input on what would be needed to be able to test it. Well, we need
Absolutely.
to hire this outside source to be able to perform this test, or we need this kind of equipment, and they could help design or cost out that kind of equipment instead of just, no, we can't do it. What would it take to be able to do it? And they're definitely in a position that they could help define what that is. And that would in turn help leadership make a more informed decision.
And it comes back to, I think you touched on standards-driven quality guys and girls. And definitions of validation and verification are very demonstration specific. But when it comes to nuclear power plant reliability, for example, we don't test nuclear power plants to failure, try and characterize their reliability. But we would have clearly validated nuclear power plant reliability through a bunch of alternate means as well. So it doesn't have to be demonstration. And I find that people who are wed to standards cannot accept that reality. Same reason we don't test aircraft until they fail. We know, we try and understand how to make an aircraft that is reliable and can fly, and work out the individual characteristics of each component that needs to be in play to ensure it happens. We test for defects that will lead to fatigue cracks in turbines of engines, as opposed to just testing engines until they fail to characterize their reliability. So all of that understanding what needs to happen for that thing to be high quality, for it to be high reliability, for it to work. And then we can examine those things. I use this concept that we call critical thinking, which can be a challenge for some. But yeah, there's lots of ways to skin the cat.
Well, and like, if you don't have, if it's innovative enough, you may not have the internal expertise to be able to understand or deal with it. In which case, you can look outside, like to someone like you, to help a team work through that, or to help them define or understand a different way of looking at this new technology.
Well, and I suppose it comes back to the phrase I love using. Confidence is a measure of you. It's not a measure of the product. So how you gain confidence that your thing is going to work is up to you. If you want to test it until failure every single time, and that's the only way you'll get confidence, go for it. It'll take decades and lots of money. And by the time you've got the confidence you need to make a decision, the entire technology might be redundant, but it's a measure of you. And if you don't understand how your process or your product can work, and more importantly fail, then you sort of revert to third-party standards. You revert to testing in use conditions where there's no perceived interpretations or subjective uses of your product, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that in order to get away from some of these standards, or the need to cling to a standard, is to better understand your product and to understand how it works and how it fails. And there's many ways that you can do that. I like that phrase, that the confidence is about you.
Absolutely.
It's a good one.
It's not a measure of your system, but maybe that's the main message. It's a measure of you. It's not a measure of your system. And there's lots of really cheap really effective ways to generate confidence if you are willing to try and understand how your thing is going to fail or not be high quality or otherwise disappoint your customer.
Yeah, so those were a few things that we touched on. Is just bringing it back to the customer, what the customer really needs or what they want. Understanding what it's going to take to be confident in this new thing that you're looking at, where you may deviate from the standards, the way that you've always done things or the external standards. And then looking at ways to understand how to test for that, or whatever way that you need to be able to be confident in your product.
Absolutely.
Did I miss anything, Chris?
No, I think it just comes down to, at least from my perspective, just working out what you need to get confidence in your product working. And that helps fix a lot of sedentary inertia, which is, I think, the topic we started with for today's conversation.
Yes, it was. But that was a good wraparound and a good conclusion. Yeah. Well, if any of you have any comments, or if you have a story to share, or if you have another question about either sedentary inertia in quality or reliability or anything else, you can go to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR, short for Speaking of Reliability. Fred and the team will get your message, and someone will get back to you with an answer. So I appreciate talking with you, Chris.
Likewise, and I'll be speaking to you sooner rather than later on another podcast. But no, it was a pleasure. We'll definitely have to do this again.
Sounds great. I agree. Bye, Chris.
See you, Diana.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.